Call this meeting of the school committee for the city of Lewiston, Maine to order for March 16th, 2022. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Thank you. We will now do school committee member introductions. We'll start with our student rep.
Omar Osman, senior rep.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Megan Parks at large.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Jake Langlis, Superintendent.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Paul Beaublunt, Ward 7.
Megan, can you test so we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Linda Scott, City Council Representative.
Thank you. Just for the record, Ms. Hurd is here via Zoom. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any members of the committee that want to set any items that are part of the consent agenda aside? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Next item on the agenda is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the committee, be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address this committee? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment section. The next item is to recognize Lewiston Public School students. Superintendent Langlis.
So we have a unique one tonight in that we have a group that have been involved in what's called First Robotics. And this is a new organization. And if I could ask the advisors, Ms. Kathy County and Mr. Alan Graves. And I don't know if Randall's here or not, or Kelsey. But if all the advisors and those, the adults involved could please come up to the podium. Director Callahan also. And team members, we have Omar Osman, who is one of our school committee reps, Ahmed Hussein, Chance Tuttle, who's a student at EL, and Matt Ashton. If you could all also come up, and they brought their robot with them and also their banner you can see. And we have a short note here that Director Callahan helped put together. And so I have these, and I don't know if you want to share information or if you want me to go ahead and read what you've shared.
Please.
All right. I'm excited about this. A couple years back, we started with this endeavor, and I know that Miss County was a big push connected to it, and Mr. Graves has joined in and others. But just before the pandemic, they competed in their very first Lewiston Regional Technical Center competition as essentially rookies, and Director Callahan could share more about some of that story. The last weekend, our First Robotics team competed in the local Pine Tree District competition, along with teams from Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. After lots of hard work and 9 long battles, LRTC 8023 is the name of their team, earned a spot as third-ranked team. Shortly after, with 4 more dominant wins, it was on to the finals. LRTC 8023 was crowned champion after 2 more tough battles, and we would very much like to congratulate Team 8023 for having the fortitude to overcome and show what true underdogs can do. And our team now ranks 21 out of 183 New England teams and winner of the Pine Tree event. So very much just want to say congratulations, an amazing feat. And I'd love to give you a chance to show and explain some of what you've built here and some of the stories from the competition.
So I'll just say very quickly, and then I'll turn it over to our good advisors here, but just for a little bit of perspective, for those of you that aren't familiar with First Robotics, you check out their web presence. It's amazing. It's an international organization for students to get involved in engineering and robotics. It involves some really complicated and complex kind of problems that they throw at you to build this robot. It requires an immense amount of work and teamwork and commitment as a club. And so for us to show up at a regional event like this and win is sort of like showing up to a NASCAR event against teams that have been well established for many years. Mr. Graves was sharing with me that some of those teams pulled up with their own tool trucks and customized tool making capacities on site. So to say that we're incredibly proud is an understatement of the work of our amazing students and our wonderful advisors. And I want to turn the floor over to them and kind of let them talk about what they've done, but it's a real accomplishment.
All right, thanks for having us again. This is our robot. It doesn't look like much just sitting there. But I'm telling you right now, that thing is an animal. It's pretty heavy, weighing in with a max of 100 and I think 38 pounds. I think we had 5 pounds to spare being in the limit. These guys put together an amazing strategy. And one of the things you don't see here is they completely tore this down to nothing on last Monday. And then went with a completely different design. And I said, well, that may not be the greatest idea. But they said, no, I think this will be better. And they went with it. And I said, that's great. And it proved to be well. Omar or Mid, do you want to come up, say anything what you guys done? Or do you want me to do it for you?
You should.
All right. Good evening, guys. I'm sorry, my English is not the best, but I'm actually from Egypt. Mr. Langlais know me. Well, I have been in Egypt for the past 6 months, and I just came back like 2 or 3 months ago. Joining that club was just a big thing for me. I have never known how to use screwdrivers or anything. After I joined the club, I learned a lot from these guys. Like Mr. Graves taught me a lot. Omar taught me a lot about programming as well. I joined the club and my hope was just to be a part of a big thing, and hopefully I was. At first, I didn't really know anything about the design, but last Monday we literally took everything apart. I was able to be involved in everything, like making the robot from the beginning, like putting the wires together, putting stuff together, thinking about the design. And we had some troubles running the robot and in the competition, and we were able to change the design at the last second, and Matt helped a lot with that. So yeah, so thanks so much. If you want.
Omar, I want to share some of the triumphs or things that you had to overcome in the redesign.
And this is Matt Ashton, one of our other members.
Hi, Matt.
Chronically late.
So sadly, a few other of our teammates weren't able to make it today, but yeah, like they've said, a lot of work went into this, from literally building this thing from scratch, metalworking, woodworking, putting all the wires together, the coding. Like, there was an insane amount of effort put into this, and just the grind that went into this weekend, the energy was just out of this world. And it was really an experience. I've done other first programs, but this was something different, I'd say.
So anybody else want to share part of part of the journey. Matt, do you want to add to that? Just tell us maybe a piece of what was your favorite part of the success that you just had?
The favorite part of the success was being able to see our robot in action. Because I mean, I wasn't able to be at the competition due to transportation issues, but I watched it online and seeing our robot work and do really well because we hadn't tested it prior. We'd driven it around a little, but we hadn't tested the climbing mechanism. So it was good to see that worked really well. It was really great.
Awesome.
And
Well,
like
sorry.
throughout the building of the robot, it got really complicated at times. I'm not much of a technician. I didn't understand any of the wires. I really don't like programming, so I didn't get that. But I put a lot of work into building it, and it was great to see that pay off.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you could join us.
I'll just close out by Jeremy is our Jeremy Randall is our programming mentor. Thank God we had his skill set. I say that, but then Omar took right off from his lead and was able to do quite a bit, even if Jeremy wasn't available. So when Rob mentioned that FIRST is an international organization. It stands for FIRST is for inspiration, oh my gosh, and recognition of science and technology. And it was started by Dean Kamen. If you're not familiar, Dean Kamen is a brilliant entrepreneur scientist. One of the things that he invented was the Segway scooter, which if you've seen Mall Cop, that's what the guy rides around on. Plus many other inventions. I can't remember the number. He started FIRST so that there was something for students to do. He's described it as like the athletics of the mind. We have a lot of students in FIRST. And by the way, it's more than 67 countries that participate in FIRST robotics. And then there are layers of that too, because there's FIRST Lego League that I think maybe you're more familiar with. And I know that our middle school has had, I'm not sure what this year looks like, a team, but when you look, I forgot what I was going to say, but FIRST Robotics was started by Dean Kamen, and it is like Odyssey of the Mind as well, but it's a place for people who are maybe not that athletic or haven't been part of a lot of other activities in their lives, a place for them to go and put in as much time or perhaps more, fuller, than some of the athletic teams do, because we work year round. And when the students have talked about building this robot, we don't know what the game is going to be until kickoff in January. So we had 6 weeks to build. And then, like they said, we really built the robot in a week last week. I think I do need to mention too that we had 3 other mentors with us. They were alums of Baxter Academy, which is, if you're not familiar, a public charter school in Portland, but they had, the Outliers has a robotics team, and the other mentors, 2 of them are my own sons who are now at Wentworth and RIT, and they came and spent the week with us. They helped us strip it down and worked as, I know they're my own kids and I have a bias, but I think that they were fabulous mentors to work with these guys, to encourage them and have them doing most of the work with the guidance of 2 people who are not that far away from their experiences. And I'm so proud. I not emotional, what you guys did. And I hope that I think you've heard it, but recognize and continue to support us. We have another competition the weekend of March 31st, April 1st. And right now we have a lot of points, 21 out of 183 in New England. And there are many more competitions that are going right now, but the top 80 teams get to go to the districts, which is the 2nd or 3rd week in April. So with, you're cheering us on, it would be a great thing for us to know that you're thinking of us at our next competition and to get us to districts, and then who knows, maybe worlds. That would be fabulous. So thank you so much for all of your support. Thank you guys.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Bowden first and then
Thank you. I just wanted to say congratulations. And back in 2019, I participated in a field trip with the preschool that I work at, and we brought our littles to a robotics competition at the Colisée, and it was amazing. And we haven't been able to do it because of COVID for a couple of years, but I'm just wondering where your next competition is. Is it in Maine? Is it local?
No. And the
No.
one that you went to is the Pine Tree, but with all the changes that happened at the Colisée this year, they had to hold it at Thomas College, which was not as good a venue. Our next one is in Durham, New Hampshire. I can't remember the name of the facility. They just changed it. It was going to be at Pease, but what's it called? RJ Kelly. Thank you.
Could you, if you remember next year before your robotics competition that is locally in Maine, can you kind of let the school board know so we have an idea? Because I think it's a great field trip opportunity for maybe not just us, but for Lewiston Public Schools in general to go see that.
I think it's important to note too that the reason that we are, LRTC has 6 sending schools coming in. This is open to any students 9 through 12 in any of the 6 sending schools. So it's also important that if, you know, people out there, we would love to have, obviously, we need to continue to build our team. It's been very difficult over the last, because we did have a season last year, but it was all virtual. It's been hard to build in this pandemic time. Yes, we absolutely will. I will forward that. Well, Omar will, because he's part of the school committee.
All right, thank you. So congratulations. So the gentleman from Egypt, your English is spot on. It's great. So don't even worry about it. So my question, and I don't want to put this gentleman on the spot by any means, but with transportation issues, that's disheartening to know that you couldn't be a part of that. But that might be something we need to look into, because you should never not be able to be there. We should be able to support you on that. So, but that's another topic, another time. But is there any way that we can see what that does, or do you guys not have the ability to operate that? That's what I was really looking forward to.
So the coding is definitely not my end of things, but we use a different controller that we don't have now. But we would be willing to, we send you guys a video. We were looking to open it up at LHS and the LRTC hallway, kind of show what it does. Yeah, we don't have the controller, and I was told that any controller doesn't work. So.
I have a follow-up question, if I might. Oh, you have the video here? Is it of the competition? Okay, because that was my next question of like, what are the things that you have to do and complete? That's really exciting to see that.
So I can put the video up. Dave, that screen is blue. I don't know if Matt's bumped the cable there or.
Jake, are you putting, I'm sorry, excuse me, Superintendent Langley, are you putting up the video that I sent you?
Yes.
So our number is 8023. That's the one, it's blocking. We have great defense.
Just know that I don't have audio set up, but we can watch the video. If anyone wants to go to the mic and just kind of maybe point some things out to us, that'd be great.
Just narrate the video.
All right, go for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we're that bot that's to the left a little bit, that's slowly going back. So we're mainly a defense bot, so we're not shooting any balls for the most part. Our goal was just to keep the other team from making anything into the cargo hold, which is that large structure in the middle. So you can see that we go around and we're on the other team's side, pushing them away from the goal.
That first part, that first 15 seconds is autonomously. So like Omar's not even touching the controls. So that they had to program it to back up on its own for a certain distance.
Yeah, one of the robots got pushed over on accident.
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah, and you can also see the score at the bottom. So we're the blue team.
So is there more than one robot for your team?
Yes,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's like 3 versus 3. So in this is, I think, the last game. So it's our alliance versus the Red Alliance.
So you work with 2 other schools essentially at Draw, or do you run 3 robots?
No, those other robots are 2 other schools that have their own participating teams.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it looks like we're about to come up to the last part where you have to climb. Which most of these guys will do with a motor, but we just went with physics.
Yep, and we got hanging. And this is about the last part of the round.
Omar, on the bottom left of the screen, is that
Yeah.
8023?
That's
Okay.
us, bottom left over there. Yep, and that's the end of the round.
So you get points for, the balls are called cargo, and the big thing that they're throwing it into is called the hub. So it's, game is rapid reacting, it's a transportation like simulation. We start on the tarmac at an airport. So they get different points for each of the climbs. There are 4 rungs, and that last one is really hard to get to.
Yeah.
They get points for putting balls into the lower hub and then the upper hub. And then each robot is also assessed. There are people keeping stats on the robot. So we actually had the best defense statistics of all 26 teams that were there. And we have to say that Omar was, when we say we tore the robot down and didn't have a competition ready robot until Thursday night, Friday night, I'm sorry.
Saturday morning.
That means we didn't have any practice time. So when Omar took control, he just was amazing.
He was driving the robot backward.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, we had something with the programming, and he just drove it backwards, which was hard.
Yeah, it was slower backwards, and I was like, we don't have time to wait for it to go forward. I'll just go the other way.
That's great stuff. I'll make sure this video is shared with the committee as well. I wonder if next year, if you have time, maybe to get the robot done a little sooner, if maybe we could, you could send us a video or drive it over for a school committee meeting before the competition so we can cheer you on.
One of the bonuses is having students with experience now in a sense of what's going on. And when Omar and Ahmed were describing that, like the vibration from the arena and everything you're getting from it, you can't experience it unless you're there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's literally every 20 minutes they're on. So if something like Saturday morning, we weren't ready till Saturday morning, so it didn't work perfect. So they were perfecting it every 20 minutes, and then they were back on. Kudos to these guys for working tirelessly for a week straight when we had 6, and getting it done and just sticking it through.
Sounds like a very exciting time, and certainly, well, very, very proud of you. We have some certificates, and I'd love to get a picture of you with the piece that's here, and congratulations, and we look forward to your future success.
Let's turn them around so the banner shows. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
This is not typical, but Mr. Chair, we received a field trip request form before we could get into this packet for their next competition. And while we have the advisor here, Assistant Superintendent Paquette said she could send the form to the group. If it's something we could entertain this evening while we have the advisor, they can spend their evenings preparing for the next competition instead of attending the next school committee meeting to hear the field trip proposed. I don't even know if we're.
Ms. Scott,
Could I just suspend the rules to add that to the agenda? I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Oh,
I'll
lordy.
second it.
Yeah, you can.
do we have a second? Ms.
I second it.
Medina? Okay. Comments from committee on suspending the rules to hear this? Ms. Scott?
Yes, I would just like to say publicly that this is one of the only reasons that I would be in favor of suspending any rules to run a meeting. This is worth it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? We have suspended the rules. We would accept the proposal. Ms. Paquette, you have something quickly for us,
So-
or we're just going to let it go verbally? We can,
I'll send it to you quickly.
So are we making a motion?
with,
We have to make a motion to present, but we have to make the motion. Yes, we do. Yes, we do, because we suspended the rules just to,
what we
Suspend the
suspended the
rules.
rules was just to hear so there would have to be a motion to, after the presentation. Yes. after
Oh,
the
because
We
they're
presentation.
suspended the
still-
motions to hear their presentation. So now, I mean, we suspended the rules to hear their presentation. So now we can hear their presentation.
absolutely not. We suspend the rules to suspend the rules, then we talk about what it is that we're going to do. I'm just saying that is how it is done. So I would like to make a motion that we allow LRTC to present their field trip. Thank you, with the option to vote.
I'll second that.
I've sent you the field trip request attached to the email.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Whitlow and seconded by Ms. Medina. Oh, was it, I'm sorry, Member Scott.
Sorry to be so aggressive in my, in my conviction.
Okay. So if you folks would like to make a presentation about this field trip, please proceed.
Okay, I'm really hard of hearing. Did you say talk about what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay. So our, similar to what we just did, thank you. I'm on my tippy toes. We have a competition coming up, March 31st through April 2nd. And it is in Durham, New Hampshire, so it's out of state. And also, we will be hopefully spending the night in a hotel that is in Portsmouth. So the field trip consists of our team members and mentors going to New Hampshire to compete in the Peas event, and also spending the night in Portsmouth from Thursday through Saturday. So we'll be leaving Thursday night and coming back Saturday evening.
Are there questions from the committee? Ms.
Just- I-
Parks?
Is it the same competition each time, or do you use the same machine, but you present differently each time?
It's,
Is it the same challenge, I guess? each
yes, it
time?
is.
Okay.
Everything is the same. When we register for events with First in the district, you register for 2 district events. So you get to play the game, compete. I'm a little nervous, compete. And you do go to 2 different events. And then from the scores and all of the points you earn from both determines whether or not you make it to the next level, which is our district event.
Thank you.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. I'm just looking at the costs of it. Is this something that we do have in our budget to provide to them? It is. Thank you.
If I may, I just wanted a chance to just look this over, because we do have certain policy that states what we have to have in front of us to approve. So I just wanted a quick glance. So could you just give us a minute?
Simple question. I just, looking on this form, I can't find the number of students involved in this field trip.
Number of students,
Yeah,
is
is
that what you
it
said?
is
Um,
it 3, 6, 12, 100? I couldn't find it. Okay.
10.
10, thank you.
2 to 4 adults.
I looked around, I tried.
5-to-1 ratio for teachers versus and students.
Thank you. I still don't see it, but yeah, I believe you.
What I'm looking for is the section, and maybe somebody could tell me what the risks are
I don't know.
to this.
There it is. Thank you.
page
That's not on
6.
there?
Associated risks, that's what I'm just looking for. Associated risks. Right. And the reason why that is one of our big things is a couple years ago, when a student drowned on a field trip, we made sure that all parents knew what risks were when they signed the permission slip. And that's always really important to us. So thank you for providing that. I'm okay. Oh, sorry.
Ms. Parks?
Will this allow all students who want to participate, or are there additional fees that we might need to support in some way so that any student doesn't have an ability to participate because of any sort of financial, transportation, any issues like that?
I'm looking over your shoulder. And I see
Like,
looking great. I'm looking over your shoulder, and Director Callahan is nodding that yes, financially, this has been appropriated for and things are all set.
perfect, thank you.
No cost.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Whitlow?
I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve this field trip.
Second,
Motion by Ms. Whitlow, seconded by Ms. Parks. Is there discussion on committee? Seeing none. All in favor? That is unanimous. That's 8-0. Ms. and 9. Ms. Hurd was there. I'm sorry, I almost missed her. So that's 9-0.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good
Thank you
luck.
very much.
Good luck in Durham
Thank
and
We'll send Omar with an update. Hopefully trophy.
yeah, and hopefully a second trophy, right? There we go. That would be great. Thank you.
Follow the team on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, LRTC 8023. Find lots of updates and the Twitch link to watch it live.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is to review policy JJIB, sponsorship and evaluation of athletic programs.
So you have some information in your packet. This isn't a first read. Members of the committee wanted to have a discussion about this policy first, and I've invited Athletic Director Jason Fuller here. I don't know if he wants to go up to the podium just to chime in as appropriate. But there's always been this dynamic, at least historically in past practice, where for many teams, there had to be this sponsorship-like model where it was supported by local boosters or some kind of group for a 3-year window, and then it could be eligible for school committee adoption as a school-based team. And then we've had other conversations, one including last year with volleyball, where we had incredible interest, but we couldn't identify the specific financial supports to stand something up, but we knew we had incredible interest. And so multiple years in a row, Mr. Fuller had proposed this in the budget, and he kept tracking student interest. There was a successful feeder program connected to the recreation department that was seeing very good numbers, and obviously around the state and through the MPA, many schools were adopting this and having success in engaging student athletes in the process. So after that 3-year cycle of budget talks, a program wasn't stood up financially by a booster group or parents per se, but there was many years of interest. And so last year, the committee around this time voted to approve a coach, the uniforms and some equipment, which volleyball in itself is not a real expensive sport, and transportation fees for the league. It's not a very expensive sport. So it was an easier conversation, I feel, and I can appreciate where people came from it at the limited ability for some of our student demographics to have parents stand up a program for 3 years. And so there's a conversation in around equity. But as has been pointed out by Member Whitlow and others, from a policy perspective, we need to decide what we want to do so that it can give some direction to the policy subcommittee. Do we want to shift the language that exists? Do we want to leave it the same? And we really thought the first step would be, let's look at the language, see what's there, and just have a discussion about it to see what makes the most sense. I did have a conversation with Mr. Fuller, and he's welcome to join and share anything he'd like. Obviously, I do consider him to be our local expert. But just to share an overview of some of the things that he talked about was what he did with the volleyball program, survey students. He looks for the viability of a multi-year program that has a feeder system, student interest, the level of engagement. Is there a competition field? Does it look like it could have a healthy multi-year run? And if that's possible, bringing it to this group to make a decision on when that can actually be adopted. There's some other criteria to consider. But one thing I do struggle with, if we have a strong student following, is the financial burden or the availability of parents or a booster club for something that doesn't exist yet to just be the expectation. Because in things like volleyball, where we had, how many students show up last fall?
The initial sign up was 80 something, and it picked up about 40 that finished the season.
And I, just to throw a wrinkle in here, from a Title IX perspective, prior to volleyball, we had much more of an offering for male athletes than we did for female athletes. And so that was another part of our concern, which played into the conversation. I liked what the committee did last year because of how Mr. Fuller did the legwork beforehand and told us what the condition of the viability of the program. But to hear what he just said, that, you know, you had 80 or so students and then you had 40 engaged in this. I just fully believe in the holistic experience for students wherever possible, whether we're talking about robotics or volleyball or something else. Whenever kids can be part of something bigger than themselves, I think it's a valuable experience, especially at the high school level. So I think it warrants just conversation on what is actually in the policy, what is past practice, and what's the direction the committee would like to go.
Mr. Fuller, when you had 40, you said you started with 80 students, you ended up with 40 that finished through. Did it basically create an intramural league in and of itself within the school?
Well, we started, I just made a decision. We were going to start directly with varsity competition. So we'd have a natural schedule. When I said 80, that was the initial interest level that we started with the spring before COVID. So we knew we had some numbers there, and it ended up 40 kids committed to it full time. And part of it, I'm proud to say, you know, our numbers are one of the better numbers in the state in terms of programs. I had many people comment that it's very healthy in Lewiston in terms of numbers. I think we're going to have upwards of 50 kids for next year based on the interest levels I've heard after the season. We won a game, which I think is pretty impressive first year in the varsity, and we even won a playoff game. So we got to advance in the tournament. Yeah, I know past precedents with this committee has always been, you have to come here for sponsorship, which is basically saying we're willing to allow you to use the team name Lewiston Blue Devils. And then there's always been past precedents. You had to fundraise on your own for 3 years. This volleyball thing started this year was a 5-year endeavor for me. We started with the rec and kind of established a little bit of a youth program with clinics and things through the rec. And we did it for a couple of years. We developed a group of kids, in particular, a larger freshman group coming in this year. So I think it was a longer process. We didn't financially support it because we didn't have a team, but we did start something at the youth level that has grown. The rec department now does have a few more kids participating. They get plans for a larger summer program. I think us as the Lewiston High School is going to run a summer program as well. We've talked about that. So I think the process, even though we didn't mandate someone raise the money for 3 years, I think the process worked really well because we really did start at the youth level, developing numbers and getting us to a situation that we knew we could support over long term.
Ms. Whitlow.
So at first I had a conviction of 3 years because that's what people were telling me. But then once I actually started digging into it, there's nothing in this policy that states that. And so I want to make sure that it's clear so that there's never confusion going forward. And one of the things that I had a question about, and maybe you could help me on this, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just want to know so we know what to put in here. So what is the difference between the teams that you bring forward to us for new programs versus the ones that have to be the 3 years? It's nothing.
There is no difference.
It's just,
I was involved with girls lacrosse, 18 years ago when we first took that program on. That's when we lived on this 3-year window. So I know the parent group for 3 years funded it themselves, had a volunteer coach. It was a long process. In year one, when I became athletic director, I came in front of the board and said, it's been 3 years. We have numbers. We were fortunate. We had a group of parents that started and really wanted to make it happen. Obviously it's been successful in Lewiston, it was a good thing for us. And I think this is a similar situation, except we didn't have a parent group that really had the means to raise the necessary money to get started. That initial amount of money is pretty significant. So I presented it for 3 years and,
I think that's good. Do we have an actual process, like a plan in place for how we, I don't know, how do I want to say this, how we analyze to present to the school board what's good? I know that you might survey people, or what, is there a plan that we have to make it consistent?
So in terms of planning, what I do yearly, now I don't do it in front of you guys yearly. We meet after the season always with my coaching staff. We try to look at what our numbers for next year are going to be. We always look back and say, what are the numbers at the middle school levels, so we can advance plan where we're at. So that is it a definitive step by step? No, but I think that's what we do yearly. When someone comes to me in terms of a new program, that's what we start with. We start with what's the interest level of our student body. Then we find out what is out there for the community in terms of youth programs. Are there numbers coming in? And we do an evaluation. And I'll talk about girls hockey right now. We just won a state championship. Our numbers are a little low for next year. So, I've spent the last 2 weeks calling 3 different youth leagues, getting numbers of Lewiston kids to understand from grade 5 all the way up, what are the number of kids in our community participating in girls hockey, so I can make a decision, what's the best avenue for the sustainability of the program. So that's what we kind of do at the end of the season, see what we have coming back, who we got coming in. And I use numbers as a driving force for that.
And I don't want to dominate this conversation, so if anybody needs to speak, feel free to interrupt. But now with those numbers that you get, do you pass that on to the superintendent? And do we typically get like a packet just saying like, here is the information, or maybe that could be part of the plan going forward? I don't know.
I think that's an interesting layer, because prior to this conversation, I would say both as a superintendent, but also as a high school principal, and actually even when I was a middle school principal, Jason and the folks involved in the middle school this was a constant dialogue. We did this every single year, and it was, okay, we're gonna use freshman coaches to assist the skill level at the JV level and not have a freshman team this year because we just don't have the numbers, but we have freshmen and lots of room for growth. The girls hockey conversation, Jason and I started talking about girls hockey, I think in November, because he already knew from looking at year-to-year data. So we were really hoping that they'd be successful this year. Of course they were, but already in the back of my mind, because he's already ahead of that conversation and sharing the information, I knew that we have a concern for next year. And so that's when he says he started to explore, he's talking about ways to make sure that the students still have an opportunity to play, try not to impact our budget, obviously, with an already approved sponsored team, in a way that's safe and healthy for the student athletes. So there could be co-op options, things like that. There could be some years not having a team, some years pushing kids up, but those are only the approved sports or activities. He's not doing anything with new things without it coming to the committee. So, but by process in the policy, it talks about 3-year evaluations and 5-year cycles of input. We haven't done that since I've been in this district, to my knowledge. So I think that that's something we could bring back to just give people a sense of how healthy things are and what the trajectory is. As Jason's been watching it, he does communicate, but we haven't brought it to this level.
Yeah, we've never submitted a formal report. What I usually do is put it in the budget or something like that. We talk during our budget process. I'll have the numbers with me at that point, look at what we're going through. And then I'll stand up when it comes up to vote, like I did last time. We had 80 something kids who had an interest level. It's been a 2 or 3 year process of that. So that's the extent of it. Nothing formal, easy to do though.
And like everything else, just real quick, COVID's going to play into this conversation over the next couple of years, because we had a lot of students disengage for COVID related reasons. And I'd like to think that students are going to re-engage because of post-pandemic reasons.
Now,
Ms. Parks?
I have a couple questions. I know COVID has an impact on it, but in the last few years, have there been other groups that have approached to start something that the school committee hasn't known about because they didn't pass through the evaluations or anything like that?
We haven't had a big one. I mean, there's some pushes. I've put in the budget for a couple of years for a esports, because I think that's a growing trend, and I've had a lot of kids approach me about that. So and it's financially, it's a huge number. So that's something we've looked at, and we're still exploring ways to fund something like that. And that's one that's come across my desk. I'm not gonna lie, since girls volleyball started, boys, there's a huge group of boys right now that want to play. So that's been a push, and it's again with one of these things. I want to monitor numbers and see where we're at. It's not approved by the MPA yet, so that's another factor in it that I think needs to weigh into the equation. So, you know, I kind of listen to the student body. We do some surveys, look at it, and we'll make decisions as we go. But there's nothing that's really passed, you know, where I've said no to and not got to your level.
Great. And then I don't know if we need, if like the policy committee or someone needs to go through this, because the way it's very specifically prescribed in here, that like the school committee is supposed to be responsible for setting the standards and the criteria that the evaluations are done through and things like that. And I know in 7 years, we've never done that. So I don't know if we need to change the language or if we just need to start following the language.
I mean, I think my suggestion is when we, I think the policy subcommittee should look at this, but I think we want to tap on Mr. Fuller to say, what's the process that you use? Because it really has made sense over the years. And maybe we just put it to paper and look at it from a policy level to make sure that that makes sense.
Yeah, the thing that caught me was that it says right in here that the program evaluation or review should be a full committee. That is either the superintendent or athletic director, a high school administrator, a middle school administrator, teachers who are employed as coaches, parents, students, and community members. So that's, I don't think we're doing that by any means. So just, that's one piece that we should either take out if we're not going to do that or start doing if that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I think the best way to go about this is Mr. Fuller, bring us your thoughts. Maybe sit at the table at a policy committee meeting and we just kind of like brainstorm or give him what you think. But I think combined with what your thoughts are and what we think process wise, when we look at things for policy, what makes sense and blend it. I think, yeah, I mean, the one thing about policy, I'm just a stickler. Like if it's in policy, gosh darn it, we're going to follow it. So, but if it's not, like, it's okay to change it and so that we can follow it. And that just makes complete sense. So I appreciate you coming and kind of brainstorming with us a little bit today.
I just want to add, I don't have a time tracker on me, but I know that last year, right around this time, because we were asking for a coach, I don't think we talked about this policy for anything less than a couple of hours when we talked about this team. And everyone that sat in this room, including members of the audience, myself, all thought that we had a 3-year requirement that had to be supported by boosters and external people. And then when you look at the policy, it became a practice somehow. We all thought that that was the way it was, and it's not actually in the language. So I want to thank Member Whitlow for saying, you know, this doesn't feel right. There's something wrong with this, and I think we can get it right.
One thing that's in here that I think is something we probably should really discuss too, says in order to assess the sustainability of these activities, each activity will be evaluated on at least a 5-year cycle. That's in the first page, just above where the criteria is. Have there been programs that have been eliminated because of lack of sustainability?
Yeah, we definitely, since I've been here, eliminated some programs. Mostly, I'll be honest, around budgets. I think 8 to 10 years ago, we had a significant budget cut in the athletic department, where we had to make a big cut. So we had to kind of look at numbers and what was the best way to save some money and get us into a budget that was fiscally responsible for the citizens of Lewiston. So what we did is we went through every program, kind of come up with a per pupil amount of money we're spending on it, kids' involvement and so forth. And the result was we eliminated our bowling program because of very low numbers in the Lewiston area. We eliminated multiple freshman teams. So we have in the past, but it's mostly been around budget numbers. I think Mr. Langlis talked to us or mentioned this earlier. We have been creative at different times with numbers have been a little low. We've eliminated a freshman team for a year, knowing numbers would come back. And we just, had those coaches coach at the varsity or JV level and then reinstated that program the following year. We've done that on a couple occasions, but not the elimination only happened around budget times where we had to come up with some significant cuts.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. While I have Mr. Fuller at the podium, I have a question about sponsorship. Have we ever had sponsors for our athletics programs? Do we have any currently?
Yes, varying difference, you know, it depends what your definition of sponsorship is. But putting a restaurant on a jersey to pay for a jersey, we've never done that. And I'm not sure we are allowed to do that. We do have a athletic sponsorship with Pepsi, where they helped with the fields, and we have a contract with them over the next 10 years, which has really been beneficial for us. So there have been some various things, you know, we've had a lot of booster people that have donated money in return for different things and things like that. But a true sponsorship where you logo a company on a uniform or anything, we've never done that.
Well, I asked because I've noticed another high school program, Oxford Hills, seems to have a lot of sponsors. They have a radio station that airs all of their games live with a commentator. I've noticed that at other schools as well. It just seems like kind of a next step, something to help fund the athletic program. And I just didn't know if that's something that we could look into in Lewiston. I don't know if you've ever looked into it, if that's something that's on the table or not.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, it's just a matter of in the right situation and what they're looking for in return. And yeah, we've done similar things. I mean, the uniform we've never sponsored, but a lot of warm-up shirts we have. So if someone says, I'll give $1,500, we've done something like that because it's not mandated by the rules of the MPA or the NFHS. So we've done varying things like that.
At this point, I guess I would take a straw poll about whether or not we recommend that policy subcommittee review this in conjunction with Mr. Fuller and bring it back to us at some point in the future. Is that a fair assessment of where we're at as a committee? I'm seeing a lot of agreement. Is there anyone opposed to allowing policy to do that? Well, if that's the case, then I guess that would, you know, the recommendation would be to have policy committee bring this to one of their meetings in the near future. Mr. Fuller, I guess you'll have a date at some point.
No problem. Easy enough.
Okay. And thank you for bringing this, the girls volleyball team into fruition. And, you know, if the boys are thinking they're missing out on something, then, you know, maybe that's next. So.
And I have a quick question about that. So girls are approved through MPA, but boys are not. And why is that? Do you know?
I don't. I can guess some of the reasons. I think a lot of it was around Title IX and creating more opportunities for our young ladies to compete. It seems to be was more active growing with the girls programs. I couldn't tell you why I wasn't there at the beginning, but I'm seeing it more and more. In fact, last week I think there was a boys volleyball game between two schools down south. I can't remember the two schools, so I think you're going to see that as time goes on. If you haven't been to a volleyball game, it's pretty fun. It's a real positive environment. It's different than what you might see at a hockey game or a basketball game. And I think it'd be a great ad long-term. I think once we get more schools participating, we can actually have a league. I think that would be the next direction.
Just real quick, just for clarification, the boys play in a different season timeframe than the girls as well?
Correct. Yeah, they would be a spring sports season. Where the girls are in the fall. I think that's a factor in this as well, trying to make it all work.
Thank you.
Everybody
Thank
else
you,
set?
Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
How many championships are we away from 100? 11. Thank you. Thank you. Just checking. I'll keep asking.
Okay, that will, the next item on the agenda is item 7, which is a waiver update. Mr. Superintendent.
Well, I have obviously an update on the waiver. As you know, this committee voted unanimously to support the recognition of how challenging this year was and has been and continues to be, frankly, in our transition. And while things are going well in the transition, there's still a lot of challenges that we're facing. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, we face the challenges. Our teachers, our staff have been amazing to work through them, and kids are at school in person, full-time, obviously. But the effort around the waiver started months ago. Member Damon and I have worked with the state. These can't come directly from me. The school committee has to vote, and then we crafted a letter, we put some criteria to it, and we proposed it. Well, we found out recently, and we got hard copies, so we added this to our agenda, that the waiver for 4 days has been approved by the Department of Education. And so what that means is we have some work to do in our calendar, but this would do a couple of things, and I just want to put a couple of slides together just to share. It might help give us some context here. YouTube stole my screen.
While Jake's finding that, just to be clear, the waiver request was to reduce the number of in-school student days from 175 to 171, I think it was 4 days. So that would be a direct impact on student in-school days, which of course, has an impact across the entire district.
So just sharing this kind of as a visual that, again, excited to have these days waived, given the number of challenges that we've worked through this year. And without these changes, the last day for students would have been June 24th, which is extremely late. Our facilities aren't set up for that. Our people are tired. And again, I don't mean that in a negative way. This has been a very challenging 2-year swing. So one day is going off the student count, or being counted actually this Friday. This committee voted to approve, and we had some good input from staff, high percentage of folks that wanted to do this to not go too deep into June. So Friday, there's actually school, and that transition in this sense buys us a day. The 4 days with the waiver obviously buys us 4 more days. And the other component to this is it gets us back to before Juneteenth, which is a Monday holiday now, which we didn't have in our calendar when it was approved, but certainly became a federal holiday. We will recognize it as appropriate. So this results in a student release of June 15th. And so I don't like losing instructional time, but I also think we need to be mindful of the work that people have done this year and last, and honor that. Whenever we can do something to support, I think, what is a greater good or a morale piece, we should. And I think this is one of those ones that I feel like is a win, and no need to vote or anything tonight. This is just an update on the waiver approval for request that we've gotten it back, so that you have that answer.
Ms. Parks.
Can you break it down again for me? And I know you did this for me at the last meeting when we discussed this, but so it was the 24th. We're backing off the 4 days that we missed. There tentatively, the 20th was going to be recognized for Juneteenth. But if our last day, how does that get us back to the 15th?
Yeah, so the 24th was the last day for, actually, I think it was for staff. I apologize. That's an error. So 23rd was students. So it goes 23, 22, and 21. So there's 3. And then prior is the 17, 16 in the prior weeks. So there's your 5 days because of both school this Friday and the 4 days in the waiver. That's my mistake on there. The last day for students was the 23rd.
So the last day for students now will be the 15th. The last day for teachers will be the 16th? Or no?
So there's some other components to that with the waiver, and we'll share more information about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Whitlow.
So the last day for students being the 15th, that is only if we don't have any more snow days.
That's actually an excellent point because the state has waived the number of days. And initially, we approached this with trying to approach saying that the 16th would be the last scheduled school day, which was what our calendar adopted last spring. So staying ahead of that, the state, I think, was interested in that proposal. And I think that's why we had some process and some back and forth with what that would look like. And ultimately, through working with them, we came to the 4 days, but really it took us to get kind of closer to being out of that snow season for us to say, this is how many days we're asking for. And Bruce and I did not feel comfortable asking for more days than we had used. And so that's where the 4 came from. But you make an excellent point that if we have a snow day, which this is March in Maine, it could happen at any point in time on a whim. And we have had a couple of delays. So if there's another snow day, it will shift these dates. I will do everything I can within my power to melt snow if it's falling from the sky.
So that's where we're at currently. That I think is a win for the students. I mean, most of our buildings are not air conditioned. This one particular one is, but most of the rest of them are not. And as Jake pointed out earlier, we have head times when we go late into June that we can't hold school because it's unhealthy because of the heat level in the buildings, which would just keep kicking it down the road. So by trying to end it as early in June as possible, we get away from that risk as well. So it's a challenge, from all levels. Mother Nature is a cruel master, to say the least, and we're all on sort of on the receiving end of it. Mr. Bopal.
Having taught in brick buildings with limited windows, no air conditioning, and big fans that just circulate hot air, I couldn't agree more.
Okay, we'll move on then. The next item is to review and revise the budget. I see Alan is here and Adam is here, and Mr. Superintendent, I guess the floor is yours.
Okay, so we've had some good discussions at the Finance Committee. We've had some good discussions around some different topics and areas, and trying to project out again what we started this process with was where we were at, and then here are at this point in the game what we think are responsible reductions and revisions. And so I want to walk through the items and give you some totals, but I want to emphasize that this process isn't done. This is just where we're shifting to. I'll also note that prior to us getting going, Adam Hansen passed out 2 documents. These are just updates. And I think these are important because I want you to see what's going to be in the city binder that is going tomorrow. So they'll be looking at the revisions already included that we're talking about tonight. So the binder they get doesn't match the one you got initially because of the work that you've already done around some reductions that we're sharing here. So this is kind of that next round of really digging at the what we call the school committee version of the budget. As you know, next Monday, we meet with City Council. It's a joint meeting. We're hopeful to talk to our colleagues and get some information and input on what they're seeing on the city side and have conversation around, what's the tax base saying to their representatives, and so that we can continue to do our work here. And then bring new information a week from now. And then ultimately we get real close to a presentation that's not really a joint meeting, but where we go to, or at least I go to City Hall to present to the city the final version that you would have approved by then of our budget for their consideration and vote. So some stages that are still left. I don't want to pretend that this is done, but I think this is a big step in the process, and looking for your input on these items and how we move forward. So without further ado, same format as in the past. Oh, there was another handout too. I apologize. This is just a listing by school. This was a question that came up, I think, by a few people. So this handout shows you by school, the number of students, and that includes the number of ELL students, the number of special education students, and the number of total students. It also shows you the staff, and the staff listing includes just a total. I don't have the whole breakdown, but the total of the number of teachers, ed techs, counselors, nutrition, custodial, and all, et cetera. So it's all the staff at that school. So that's what that listing is, and we're open to any questions on that. Reminder that the sheet that looks like this, that's revenues. So revenue is money coming in. I just want you to recall that when we talk about money coming in, some of these conversations that we're having around tuition savings or local entitlement savings, some of these pieces land in just transition in funds that are just smart use of funds or smart placement of funds. But some of the things we talk about with things like main care and billing for main care, those aren't realized on the revenue sheet until we do that. And so we can't fabricate revenue. We can only estimate conservatively, and I'm very conservative with the estimates. We can estimate conservatively what those numbers are. And then the next page that you have, just for an overview, is a list of the articles with the adjusted amounts that include the changes, I think all the changes that we're going to present to you tonight. Okay, so these are new amounts, and these sheets already exist in your binder, so I don't know if you want to put them in front or behind or just a different tab, but yeah, so the what you have now in your binder is where we started. And we're going to talk about a couple $1 million tonight. So these numbers are very different in reduction. Yeah, and Ms. Eames is saying it's D and E if you want to look at your tabs. Be okay if I start with the items, and then if there are any questions around other areas of the binder or input, certainly we'll do our best to answer them. All right, so the slide I have up right now, the max or the cap is the term I'm using on the annual insurance adjustment. That's that number that won't be available till late March. We've budgeted in your binder 12%. It's a responsible number to start at. When we get the max, it tells us what we can adjust. And again, that will be available. I say late March, but really it's the 24th of March, and I hold part of my breath until that day. But remember, it could come back higher. We're trying to operate off of what we really believe at this point, but there's no guarantee. So looking at that, we talked about every percent mathematically of reduction from the insurance number is $119,000. So what we did in this particular bullet is, again, we're looking at a moving target. But if, and I capitalized if, it comes in at 9%, that would be a $357,000 reduction in our budget. So what Adam's done, Adam and Bill and their work, they've gone in, so you'll see reductions across different areas in your articles that reflect that 357,000, again, as a projection of a bit of a moving target. The next bullet I have is just, we mentioned this again in process, but this is putting all the things together we've already talked about large in part. The further calculations with main care seed funds, that's a different main care piece of our budget. It's an item we're responsible for. And we've itemized this and gone through, and we have found that we can trim that by, I'm rounding, but it's $200,000. So that's an actual, you'll see that reflected, and that's funding that we're trimming.
When you say trimming, can you tell me where that's trimming? I'm not understanding how the wording right now, I
Oh,
guess.
by trimming, I just mean we're reducing it. We're cutting it down.
No, I understand what that means,
oh,
but I meant, so I know that we're not billing the way we should be billing.
So main care seed is
Oh.
about, it's a part of like a fringe and benefit component. where main care billing is really about the services that we already provide that we can be reimbursed for.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
No, it's a good question. And as far as main care, see, that's all over, right? Because that's tied to staffing. In terms of where in the budget might be, would it kind of would be spread in many articles? Oh, it's specific to Article 2 then. Not main care billing, but main care C. Yeah, okay.
Just to be clear, the first item, the 357, that's a reduction in cost. And the second one is actually a reduction in revenue? No, they're both cost?
Yeah, they're both cost specific, because we've estimated 12% the insurance, and so that's in fringe benefits. And the main care seed is in, Adam's looking for the lines in Article 2, in the math that he did with our personnel and what that would cost versus what was budgeted.
Historic periods, the last five years or so, to see what we had put in for a budget number. And from that, felt comfortable to bring it down by 2,000.
So
We're looking beyond.
yeah, they can't hear you as well. So what Bill's, that refrigerator is so loud for those of you at home, you can't tell, but there's, you can't hear anything on the side. What Bill was sharing is that, and I'm going to build off of it a bit. What we haven't done in many years that we're doing now is we're looking at multiple years of spending and making sure that our budget aligns to what we actually spend over multiple years. We haven't pulled things together enough. And so through some transitions, I think we're in a great place where we can say some of these numbers are based on past actuals. So we're not over budgeting because we're referencing prior years instead of building off of well, we just have this, so add money. We're looking at what we've actually spent over the years and drawing that from a place of kind of more zero base and what we need versus, well, this is what we got last year, so let's add to it. We're not doing that. Other lines that we're looking at, we have some teacher edition materials that we're able to secure or have already secured through ELO. This isn't a big savings, but I think every little bit counts. So we've either already acquired for use, and these are things that can be reused. It's like the teacher edition, not the consumables that the students use. And we also have some available funds for these kinds of things in eSurf. Last year, we got into a lot of conversations around what things cycle on which rotations for replacement. And so we wanted to put things in eSurf that once we have it, and it's not going to be just something that is a massive cost year to year that we're just trying to push back in at the end. And so this is one of those things that we believe that's a straight savings. And if not, it's a one-time purchase. There's still a lot of money in that area for the consumable portions of the curriculum, which is the things that kids use day to day that we have to replenish. So that savings is around those multi-year use items. But it doesn't reduce that line all the way. It's just that amount that we think we can work through. Elo Edtech, this is part of our DOJ work. And so last year, as you know, we spent some money with some shifts, but one of the things that got shifted is our edtechs it's not a permissible thing to use edtechs in our ELO classrooms in the way in which we had for years. This is the right direction. So all of those edtechs got pulled out of your budget before you even got it. Well, when we pulled all of those edtechs out, I can own this, but we didn't grab the benefits also. So when we were reviewing things line by line, we saw this, we picked this up. So this is a $90,000 reduction, but this is more in that correction field. So it's in your binder. It exists in there as part of that total bottom line. So we're pulling that out, and that will be a different bottom line. The summer learning materials, we talked about those summer camps, like a STEM camp or things like that. Camp's not the right term, but not traditional summer school and not the special ed summer school. This was more that shorter term, 3, 4, maybe 5 weeks of coming in and doing specific projects tied to different activities. There were supply lines connected to that. We have used other funds for that to keep those running. And so these have been pulled out. But I'm not going to be misleading to you that kids have huge benefits in these programs. We have ways to pay for them in the short term. But this is one of those items that when we pull that out, it's like the summer school conversation. We will continue to dig for and look for other funds, and we've been able to put things together. But if those funds don't come through or those grants don't come through, we would be at a loss for those kinds of programs. That 46,026 is entirely materials. So that's the stuff for the labs, the things to do, the different activities. It doesn't include teachers and transportation, what have you. The computer has a delay. All right, we have the local entitlement shift. We talked about this a great deal. This is program neutral. I think that's something that came up as a question. I just want to make sure that people know that this is really taking two pieces of that pie, moving where they get billed out of, and so that we save 16% on the benefits, and that full markup is $146,000. Our substitute budget, again, looking at that multi-year usage review, we believe we can extract $50,000 from that. Now, that doesn't mean less subs because we're out of money. It means we still have a level of need, but based on the need and the amount of subs that we have, year after year, we have had money left over. We think that this is a safe number that we can pull out of this budget with that multi-year review. Pardon me for 1 second, skip back, make sure I got them all because my computer kind of skipped on it. There we go. Maybe not. What is going on? This one right here. That we didn't hit. We did that last time. We also have a multi-year cost in the breakdown. We talked about this a bit, especially the facilities group. The camera project and or the safety project or the equipment safety project. There's items, $240,000 this year in facilities in Article 9, and that would have to occur again next year, a comparable number next year to complete portions of the project. I've already asked, and they're already working on, Josh and Dave to look at that project and try to sort out with our agreement for this work to be done with LCIP, with funds that exist, what things we can do to return to the table. So if that's a budget constraint, we think we can return to that conversation. And again, this is one example. This might be cameras at the Dingley building. But from where I sit, if it's cameras at the Dingley building or teachers in the classroom, it's an easy decision. And so that's 240 this year. And if we go that route, I just want to make sure people are aware that that's a comparable number next year. So really, we're looking at more towards $500,000 over a 2-year swing, and just adjusting what we are able to do with the funds that we do have available to us. In equipment, I put various reductions. I don't have a list for you, but I think in a really hard conversation, we can find this kind of money, but it gets into those conversations around what facilities things are we not going to do? What things are we not going to upgrade? What technology things are we not able to do with local funds? And how does that look a year out when eSurf starts to sunset? And so, again, this is a hard one. And I haven't even asked Dave and Josh yet what items they would consider, but they know their areas so well that I would rather ask of them what I'm requesting and let them look through and find the savings that they're reluctant to find, but they know best what areas that fits. But again, when we talk about that, how long can we be a one-to-one district where we're putting laptops and iPads in some of the younger kids' hands? And how sustainable is that long-term? Will there be funding down the road? We have these conversations with Mr. Terrio too, and he's got the same concerns, but wants to do what the school committee wants. So there's things the computers can do, and there's lots of things computers can't do. But when we talk about the overall cost, There are differing views. We haven't surveyed teachers. I think we should do that. But as a superintendent, I land on the side of the fence that says I don't see this as being financially sustainable. But there's also different funding streams that are developing from a federal level. Maybe it is, but I still think it's a bigger conversation.
Thank you. I just want to say we did discuss this yesterday in the finance committee, and I'm more of the opinion that we should move away from the one-on-one technology in the elementary level with our students. I don't think that it's as necessary for grade school kids to need a laptop of their own while they're in school. I think for years we had carts of laptops that would come into a classroom and they'd go back on the chargers when they were done and go to the next class if they needed to. And just to be responsible with this budget, I think that really is a conversation that we need to have. And I think that is, I know we're all sick of surveys, but perhaps a survey that goes out to everybody, because I think that's an important conversation in reducing this budget. Thanks.
Mr. Bopalong.
Thank you. I echo Ward 2 committeeman's concern of one-on-one as opposed to losing summer school. I don't know. I would certainly be willing to hear more on that. I would like our students that one way or the other damage our laptops to be held more accountable. I'd like missing laptops of students that don't return them at the end of the year aggressively followed up on. I recognize the one-to-one, and certainly it's a comfortable situation now with COVID on the decline. There are no easy answers, and all I would suggest to all of us is we know we can be optimistic, but once something is out of the budget, it's very hard to get it back in. So we do have to think long-term as well. These are not easy decisions.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. I just wanted to concur with Ms. Bowden that it's a tough conversation. We had a tough conversation yesterday about this, but I think we have to look at reality too. And we've seen some cuts. I'm still looking at this mill rate, and I'm still knowing that we're going to have some pushback from council at $1.38. So, or 35, excuse me, took the glasses off, apologize. It was a necessity through COVID. We had to find solutions, and I commend you for finding those solutions for students that had to stay home and students that didn't have the opportunity to have computers in their homes already, or laptops, or any equipment to use. But the reality of our economy and the situation is that that's a luxury, in my opinion, and something that we're going to have to seriously have that conversation. And moving forward with that, I wonder if we're going to do a survey or anything, can we do that sooner rather than later? If this is going to be part of the conversation with the budget, I think it's something we need to look at right away.
Yeah, I mean, we can survey folks at any time. I do want to get feedback from our folks with the instruction piece. I want to get a better sense of who's using what and how frequently, and how beneficial they feel it is to the student learning. I will note too that while there's some savings in that realm, if we decide to shift away from one-to-one, much of the materials that we have now that Dave's team has worked incredibly hard to get in, get ready, and get out and deployed to our students and staff, they're relatively new. And a lot of this cost that you're seeing that might be connected to one-to-one would be the software being used, would be the damage and lost items. That it's really about, it's less about can we stand this up in the fall with a responsible budget number, more about how does that attrition play out more long-term, because if you don't have the students without devices, you don't necessarily need all the software. Software has licensing fees. If we don't have kids paying for the damage or not returning their devices, or they're just lost and never returned, we have a depleting inventory to put it in everyone's hands. And in my mind, there's a threshold. If we can't put it in all kids' hands, what's the line the committee wants to hold in and around equity, where we tell a student who maybe broke their screen, but then we'll get into the conversation of, can that student's family afford to fix that screen And does the class move forward without the student having that screen? And is that right? Is that not? And when we talk one-to-one, Dave and his team and our administrators, they really tried it hard to hold the line with things coming back and things being inventoried. But we still have situations where, one student in the class that doesn't have it, and what do you do? And that's that challenging part. And not all of this equipment, and I put various on purpose, is not just technology. I think we can work hard and extend the life of things somehow and go that route.
Dave, is some of that stuff that would be reduced, would that be also some of those, like those MiFi devices and the ongoing costs of those that, I know those are
out.
Those are, those are.
I've already, yeah.
Right,
ahead.
so we have an emergency connectivity fund grant that we're trying to just, right now, we've got the last bit of information in for it. If we, I think it's Sam Gov account that Bill just took care of recently, and they got the good news today, so hopefully that all goes well, and then we're gonna have probably plenty of money till June 30th to take care of any needs as far as hotspots and data plans and so forth. Beyond that, we don't have that money, but we have the money till June 30th. Real quick on the one thing that hasn't been brought up tonight, we have warranties on our iPads and on our Chromebooks and so forth, and they're 3-year warranties. So for the next 3 years, our devices that are damaged within reason, our accidental damage, are taken care of. We send them in, we get them repaired. The MLTI is going to take care of looks very closely like they're going to take care of our grade 9 group in the fall that will take their device for 4 years. And then the next grade 9 class, they'll take their device for 4 years. So we are really positioning ourselves in maybe a better spot than dire consequences as far as the tech. I think Jake hit it. It's a software piece that's going to be the biggest concern. But as far as hardware, we're gonna be okay for 2-3 years, I think. And then I think, Jake, I think you're absolutely right. Then some of those other things, all, and the software's kicking in as soon as ESSER is done. So, yep.
Thank you, Dave. Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I guess a couple clarity questions. First, are we no longer having parents sit through the informal meetings on the responsibilities for our kids of owning a laptop and signing a contract? Like I totally did that. When my oldest hit 7th grade, I had to sit through a presentation and sign a contract that said I was responsible for that laptop because I was responsible for that laptop. And then my second question to kind of piggyback off of that, I ran into a situation where my youngest, when she entered middle school this fall, was not allowed to use her own MacBook. She got a school issued MacBook, and it was an issue around having a guest Wi-Fi or something at the middle school. It wasn't available. So, and they said, basically, we would have to own the hard drive of your daughter's MacBook if she brought it to school because it would be connected to Lewiston Public Schools. So she had to get a school issued laptop. So she's now responsible for 2 laptops. Can we move past that? I know my high schooler has her own laptop, no problem at the high school. There's never been an issue. Are we able to let parents know we're in a day and age where, we do have some families that can provide a laptop for their child? Is that a direction that we can kind of move towards and make sure that it's sustainable for them to use their own laptop at school?
I think those are both great questions. The first one, I'll do my best to answer, and Dave, you may have to come back up for either of them. But the first one, when the pandemic hit, I think in that first 6-month window, the push was really put a device in everyone's hand. We don't know what's going to happen. And so to have parents come and sit and sign a contract, it just didn't happen because it was a district-wide decision, I believe, at the school committee level to say, this has to happen for us to have school. And so it became like a textbook. You don't sign for necessarily a parent contract on a textbook. And so that, in that sense, that's how it looked. Part 2, or your second question about a student-based laptop and a guest network at the middle school. Dave knows a lot more about the network security components than I do and his team. But I also know that there's an age issue at the middle school and their access to things by way of school through SIPA essentially. And it's a governmental, it's federal law and policy that students under the age of 13, Dave, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. There's an issue with students on the age of 13 cannot be, it's not permissible for us to allow certain connectivity access in public school without risking loss of our subsidy and funding and being found liable for other certain situations. I don't know. If
Yeah,
you
there's
can explain that better than
there's
me.
some laws that come into play there. Copper is one that the vendors have to comply with, but there's a little piece of that we have to be concerned about. The other one is SIPA, of course, which is basically we have to basically agree that we have a filtering system in place for students, which is where this comes in a little bit. We have to make sure we have filtering in place. We have to sign off on that every single year. Jake puts a signature to it to get any E-rate funding, which is very valuable and saves a lot of local tax dollars when we can get the E-rate funding. And if students bring in their own device, some of the concerns are, number one, they're skirting some of that. They're trying to attempt to beat the filtering, and that type of thing, because they're on their own personal device and it's not locked up like we do. We lock them up to make sure that we can manage them. And I use the word locked up. I mean, kind of a tech term, but really what we're doing is we're managing those devices appropriately and making sure. So that's the concern. Elementary, I know they're concerned about kids bringing in their own laptops because what is on that laptop? Mom and dad know from home, right? But as an instructor, whatever, you don't know. You got a kid over there playing a game on their own laptop, and the other kids are supposed to be doing their work and what have you. So there's concerns that way around people bringing in their own personal devices. And so we're trying to keep kids focused on what they should be doing and not doing something else on their personal device.
One other add is when we buy software, by licensing, we can't distribute it to non-school devices in many cases. So we use this thing in class for learning, and we can't then take the license that we paid for and place it on somebody's private device. Am I saying that right? That Dave, you're so much better at this than I am.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's licensing around that we have to be careful of. So when somebody says, well, a teacher says, hey, well, this is the lesson of the day, and this is what I want you guys to be doing as part of this lesson. And then that child who is only using their personal device suddenly goes, well, I don't have that software by machine, and we can't put it on there for them. So now you've got kids in your classroom who can't take part in that lesson because they're using a personal device. And then you get into the whole headache of, how many spares would you have to have in each classroom to provide, access when that time comes, and the changeover from the device they're working on to another device, and kind of the upheaval that has in the classroom. So it's teachers knowing that everybody has what they need to be participants in that lesson that day. So there's a lot of other factors that probably people don't necessarily see.
I think they're good questions, though, and I'm also curious, what do some other districts do around this? And I think it's something that's worth looking into further.
I just find it fascinating because as a sixth grader in elementary school, she was able to bring her own laptop for the hybrid year, and there were no issues at all surrounding it. And then there was an issue when she got to middle school. But I just want to drive back on the piece that I think, it's great that we have a warranty on the laptops for the next 3 years and the iPads that can be fixed. But I just think personal accountability is really important. And I think we really need to uphold that with our students and our parents.
I couldn't agree anymore. It's absolutely something that we should be doing, is holding, and Paul brought it up too, is we should be holding these kids accountable for damage, especially willful damage to devices. Yep.
Thank you, Dave. Okay to move down to that next item.
Yeah, I just wanted to check to make sure that member Hurd doesn't have questions about this, or she's all set.
So I can see her on my share screen, and she's
Thumbs
saying
up.
she's good.
She's okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
The next one down, we had, I don't know if you remember, but we had kind of that rapid series of $1,066 in one spot. And we trace that back to a training, kind of a fee to attend a national school resource officer training. And again, when we talk about safety, we have a unique capacity here locally, and Mr. Reese connected to our law enforcement program and working with LPD. And those are things that I would pushed it, but we're going to revisit that real soon. We think we can do that with local information and some know-how and save those funds. So we've reduced that. Again, not a massive amount, but every little bit contributes. I don't know what's going on. So I've clicked twice. I'm just waiting. It's, yeah, there's like something in the middle that's not supposed to be there. And
Before
Yeah.
we move on from this, I just
Oh,
wanted
she did
to,
it on its own.
oh,
Sorry.
no, that's okay.
Sorry.
Just talking about security cameras and this. So I just was Googling security cameras for school grants. So that just brings me to my, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff here. So that just brings me to that whole thought of a grant writer position and how that could be the most beneficial thing that this district could ever have. So there's just so much here that we could utilize.
All right, we covered this one. I'm gonna. Don't know why, so I hit click, I'm just waiting.
I have the line numbers.
Oh, okay, yep.
1148 and 1150.
If you want to look at the main care seed, it's in line 1148 and 1153 in your tab G, I think it is. Yep.
So remind us what we're looking at.
That's the main care seed specific. That's when we said we could, looking at past numbers, we can reduce by 200,000. That's where that $200,000 will be pulled out of. It's not the whole amount. It's just looking at projections from past actuals. And it lands in those two lines because if you see the breakout by age grouping or grade levels, so again, with the articles, there's always that cutoff in between. So you have the 912 number and the K8 number being reflected in those lines. So in putting things together, just some math here, I think at this point in time with the work that we've done, and again, I don't think we're done, but we're still working at fleshing out all the details. Adam has worked hard to get things accurate in what would be a new kind of packet, if you will, or new binder materials. And so just a quick rundown as a recap. The items that we're talking about tonight is just under $2 million worth of reductions. Some of that through the insurance projection, main care seed, again, the cameras, equipment, training, that safety specific training, the attending that conference, ELL curriculum, the ELL Edtech benefits that needed to be pulled out, those summer program costs for materials, local entitlement adjustments, substitutes based on projections using past numbers, and also included here, what we've already talked about here Monday night, the additional special education reductions. So these are the additional ones. So we talked about, there was a number of positions first that we were looking to reallocate to changes. And these are above and beyond the funds being used to reallocate those changes. The second, there was two groupings essentially of reductions. There was one grouping that helped pay for things with some excess savings. This is that second grouping of things. When we make these changes, there's $615,000 in salary. These are funds that are just straight reductions. They're not being used to stand up the changes that we propose. These are money out. That's it. So the reason we didn't put the big total number here is some of those other funds are being used in our proposal to stand up the changes. So these are the non-change related reductions. And I clicked, but I'm going to wait a second to see what happens. You can see it's starting to come up.
So that
Uh-oh.
1.9 million, is that reflected somewhere here?
So in the new sheets, Adam, where do they want to look for that specific amount? I think you'd have to compare sheet to sheet, the old sheet and the new sheet. If that's how you want to look at it. So, but remember that the one with the shaded area, that's a revenue. These are all expenditure reductions. That's not going to reflect, right? That's your revenue. Yes. Yep, so that. So this bottom line here, and if you compare it to the other sheet that is identical to this, and I don't know if it's D or E on tab E, this, the 6,240,918. So that's that current, this is with changes. And if you compare it to the other one you have in tab E, right, Karen? It will show you the difference between the two.
It's not going to tie out the dollars because there were other corrections we made.
Correct.
That
Yeah.
in the other directions. Not a lot, but it's not going to be that exact.
Don't worry, I'm not going to be that.
Yeah, but it's.
General grasp of what we're looking at.
But so I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the reason we're finding those other things that need to be moved and added back is because we are looking at that level of detail and we're asking questions, what is that thing? And making sure it's right. This is how we found the $90,000 in ed tech salaries. Now, if you don't dig at those kinds of things to that level of detail, because it may not be just those ed techs in that salary benefits line. So you have a grouping of them. And so it was recognizing that that number was too big for the number of ed techs in that particular area and itemizing that. And as you know, when we do this school by school, when you go from Farwell to McMahon to Connors, it's the same pattern. You can flip through things and thinking, yep, that makes sense, and go right through a school and not realize that one of those items was ELL and not a school. And there was $90,000 in benefits that was accidentally not yet removed. And so we do look at that level of detail. We want to make sure we have all the information for you. I did want to return to Article 2 because I felt like, and I tried to articulate the other day, but I want to put a graphic to it. The way things ended the other day, I think people felt good understanding what we're looking to do and what the associated cost was. But the way that kind of ended, it felt like, well, that's going to cost only $95,000. And as I walked out of here and reflected on it and worked with the team from Monday to now, the savings is bigger than that. But it's so hard to articulate because we can't put projected revenues on your revenue sheet. It's just, to me, that's not okay. Some people may do that. We're not going to do that. And former member Potvin joined us yesterday at our finance committee meeting. And we started to talk about some past experience that he had and just said, while these numbers aren't reflected in your revenue and your expenditures, you want to talk about them. And so this is the attempt to do that. So just walking through, what I want you to focus on for this part of the conversation is the column way to the right. So when you talk about Article 2, so where is that money either going to come from or has it been taken from? And so the local entitlement, the benefit savings, that's that 146. We've talked about it multiple times now. That's a substantive change in the local articles. So that's your tab G. That big thick piece, that's moving of pieces. It had the end result is as a direct local ask reduction. The main care billing, this is that we have a number of staff working, section 65, section 28, what have you. We can get reimbursed for the services being provided by the staff we're paying to provide the service. That's a revenue. So in our budget, when we talk about big picture, that is a massive savings. On a conservative estimate, $400,000 we're leaving on the table. Some have said 5, some said even above, but I want to be conservative and say 4. That's a revenue. So when you go look for that on these sheets, it's not there because it's not realized yet. And so that is a huge saving for us, but it's not something you can say, there's the $400,000 Jake's talking about, because it's money we know we'll have coming in, but it's until it's there and happening, we can't claim it as from a budget perspective, because it wouldn't be budget neutral. And we can't bring something forward that has this $400,000 that's going to happen and then expend it until it happens, if that makes sense. The next one down, the outplacement tuition costs avoided. This is one of those ed speak terms. So these are the kids that go out of our district. I wanted to call it in placement, but that didn't fit either. But these are really the kids who have a level of need that they need specialized programs. And if we make the changes we proposed the other day, we'll be able to program for those kids here. Director Crafts mentioned 39 potential seats here at Connors for that program. We also have middle school 7th and 8th components that kids are already outplaced that we need to get back. And we have plans in place to do that. That's part of that budget. And also the ad at the high school. So when we have all those things together, I put 40 plus seats because that's what we're looking at. And again, that's a conservative number. If we fill 30 of those, so again, trying to budget conservative, at $50,000 per student, when you think about transportation and tuition, $50,000, again, a conservative number. That's $1.5 million of avoided costs. So again, where is that in here? You can't point at it. That's the potential savings conversation, but that is a straight save for Lewiston. If we don't do those things, that tuition ends up at all of the providers in the area, and we pay to transport them or to bus them to other places. Those costs are unavoidable. This happens every year. And that's when we get into the budgeted number that was approved, and then that actual that is way above it. So you have to overspend those lines because those students are in need of those services. And then I wanted to grab the 35 reduced positions from audit work because we talk about a chunk that was used to be reallocated and there was some excess, and then there was that additional grouping that was just a straight cut. This is all from the audit work. This is all Director Crafts working with the business office and the team and the schools to figure out, all right, there's a lot of conversation in these audits that we've talked about for a couple of years now. Where's the actual savings? So the number you want to talk about is why did we do the audits? Why did we take the time to review these things and change our structures? That $1.335 million is why. Those are straight cuts in this budget. So that total in reductions is $3.381 million. And the cost of the new items that we've already discussed at length, and the different areas of things, that's a local article impact, that's 1.577. So when we look at it big picture, and I'm not talking about the additional reductions we just reviewed, this is just that Article 2 piece. This is an overall savings when we consider the revenues, when we consider the local entitlement adjustment, and we consider the tuition costs avoided. That's $1.8 million. Those are some significant adjustments in the work that we're doing. And just wanted to make sure you had that full picture of those costs and the work that we have done to reduce that overall cost.
So this is great. Because this really gives the picture of what's happening. It discusses, shows exactly what we're doing with the audit that came in. And I think this is what you have to bring to council to when we talk about the budget. I really do. And if you don't mind, I personally would like to have a copy of this page right here. I took notes on all the other ones, but this I would like to have because I think this is one of our talking points. This is part of our elevator speech right here. And we're talking to the community on what we're doing and how the budget is working and the significant difference that following what that audit said and what this is going to do and the changes it's going to make to our school department.
We've constantly heard the figure of 12% estimated for insurance. This 146,000 now represents what percent? I'm sorry? Yes, yes.
They can't hear you over there. Sorry. I told him he's going to get called to the podium for trying all night.
So there's a lot, and especially when we talk about local entitlement, Medicare, or seed, it really, the conversation really gets confusing, and that we don't. I think it's very important. I think Superintendent Langless has done a good job of trying to explain something very complex and not a too complex way. But that first one is the conversation going back to, we discovered that we were paying people in local entitlement, which increased the Maine state retirement amount that we had to pay them by 16%. So we moved them back into local entitlement and we didn't have, or excuse me, back into local and we didn't have to pay that 16% anymore. So it went down by $146,000. And then we were able to move items that aren't attached to the salary benefits of Maine State Retirement to local entitlement. So that's where that 146 savings comes from. That 146 is not attached to our health benefits, which we first budgeted at 12%, and then we went down to 9%.
Thank you. I was confused. I apologize. It clarifies that. I just have one other point here. I think all of us very early on recognized the need to try to bring a lot of the outpatient in. And I think that's very commendable, but I just want to know before we go too far and have to change horses in the middle of a stream, do we, number one, have the room? Number two, do we have, or can we budget for equipment that may be needed that we don't have? Number three, do some of the students need specialists that we'd have to bring on board that we are not certified for?
So all excellent questions. Those numbers that we talk about in Article 2, the cost at 1.577, that includes all of those items. The specialists needed, the teachers needed, the clinicians needed, and also a shift in the structure, having stability, improving communication, and getting us into compliance. So that 1.577 is all of those things. So when Ms. Kraft said, okay, we can save so much money by keeping these kids here, what would we need to do that? First one was space. Well, Connors was built for a larger capacity than it's currently using. And so we are going to use space here to do that program work here. And then she said, okay, what students would this serve? And that's when we get into the specific programs of RISE, functional life skills, RISE, and day treatment. And so we know what things qualify those programs to do two things. And they're important things. The first thing is it qualifies those programs to provide the services necessary for kids who qualify for those programs, if that makes sense. It has the stuff it needs to do what it's supposed to do. And the second part is it makes it, when you complete that picture in your program, it makes it billable. So any student who qualifies for that main care billing, we get directly reimbursed for the services we're providing to our own kids. And I really think that in part that's set up by the state to incentivize districts to keep your kids home and keep them part of your community because they are part of our community. So I also want to add that little, to me, it's a silver lining of stop or limit that transition for kids who already have enough challenges and let them stay home in their home school with the kids they see in their neighborhood and their community. But we have to resource it. That 1.577 is all of those things that it needs. Space-wise, which is I think a great question, we have Connors. We have new space now at the high school because of the expansion that we're exploring. And we're looking at a piece connected to the middle school where there may be a space there, but they may not be housed there, but they can access programming there and be housed elsewhere with some transportation pieces. So now that the new wing is open and we know we have at Connors, those are the space pieces we're looking at. And to be realistic, a year ago, we could have had the conversation about Connors, but prior to the expansion being done, we couldn't have had the conversation about space at the high school or for middle 7 through 12 programming. What we did last year was we split it. So we have a lot of 8th graders that are outplaced. We have 7th graders that are at McMahon in a program that was designed to stop at 6th grade, but it's legal. It's just really pushing the seams of that program, and they've been amazing, but they've really helped us out. And then the program that already exists at the high school was down a staff and sat kind of down a staff through attrition, but it's sat in our budget. So we're just re-energizing that piece to provide for more students. So very good questions, though. Thank you.
And I realize this particular time, workforce is a major issue. Do we feel fairly certain that we can fill these specialized job descriptions by next September?
I think it's a fantastic question. I don't think I can guarantee we fill any positions by next September, but the other thing I'll say is we're feeling and experiencing a shift, I think, in things, and people feel good about the things that we're doing in our community and the direction we're taking educationally to support staff and get them the resources they need, to examine structures, make sure they're effective, and when they're not, we're willing to make changes. People are sensing that, and they're telling people they know, they're telling people that might work elsewhere. And while we're not making an effort to poach anyone, we are actually seeing a fair amount of people come toward our operation, leaving other operations. And those are personal reasons. But I think if we continue to do things as well as we have been, we'll fill more seats because of who we are, what we represent, than we would otherwise. So I put in a break here. I'd love to talk about other thoughts, ideas, questions you may have. And I really want to reiterate, as I have the whole part of the process, we're meeting with our finance committee. We're having good, meaty discussions. There's some things that we've kind of tentatively talked about that would hurt. And I think if we have to go that direction, then we'll have to have that conversation. I do think it's valuable to have the conversation with city councilors on Monday, and also get all of your input. And our finance committee will continue to have meetings and review. I got to tell you, that list of things that we shared, that was not an easy list to generate, not an easy list to review, and not an easy list to put in a slide and say, here, but we know we need to. We have to be responsible to our community. I think this is a big step toward what it would be the school committee adopted budget, if you so approve. And I'm hearing some other things too about like the grant position that could pay for itself. And so I think that there's a little bit of that too. So I think that's where we're at this point. I don't think we're done. I just want to share the latest with you as an update.
Thank you. So I did have a question. So there are different, I see the number differences, but on Article 5, staff and student support, that went up and not down from what you had previously giving us on the 3rd. Am I reading that correctly? Because I'm looking at the sheet we had before and it was 1880 and now it's 1930%. And I just wanted to, you know, as we're looking at this and we saw that there was reductions on this, I just want to have clarification on what that number is, just so that we can talk about it.
I think it's a great question. So it's a $42,000 number, and I'm trying to run my. Yeah, Adam can look into it. I'm running my record right now of
Okay.
what might have been
I
42.
believe it was the counselor that we had in the wrong article.
Like a guidance counselor, you mean?
Yeah.
It was in Article 1.
There was a school council in Article 1, and it was, oh, yes, there was the high school counselor.
Okay.
So that was a correction. One of the high school counselors was being billed to ELL and should be billed to student services. And-
Okay.
And so that's a correction there.
Yes, it went from
Now, the
890 to 7.3%.
I just want to be
So-
able to justify that, because if somebody's just looking at this, this is a great sheet just to look at in it of itself to get an overview, just so that we could justify why that
Absolutely.
one moved.
But I'll, Bill's making notes of it too. He may have other thoughts, but I want to make sure we get you a, so,
One was at Farwell and they were both in the wrong.
and the,
We caught that after the first version.
now those two school councils are not $42,000. It means the other reductions we found, it looks like a $42,000 increase, but really it's the move was much more expensive than that from one article to the other, but the other reductions, it makes it look like a 42, if that makes sense. It's
And then
that-
one more thing on there was the, so I spoke about LRTC the other night, and you cut it some more. It was only at a 2.2, the smallest, one of the smallest things on there, and now it's at a 1.8% increase. And
Do you know how much
Wow.
those robots cost?
I,
No, that's largely grant funded, but
That would be health insurance. The health insurance.
yeah, that was the adjustment going from 12% to 9% in it, again, using a projection.
Yeah, so I wasn't gonna try to like dissect this, but can you tell me the column that's amount change, is that supposed to be,
That would be,
where is that number coming
that's,
from?
that's last year's budget and the amount change from the updated proposed. So today, kind of today's number, not your original book number.
Okay, so
So
we
it's-
would be looking at the 21-22 budget. That's last year's budget,
Yeah, so that,
yeah?
and then you do the math between 21-22 to 22-23. That's that
Okay,
amount change.
that makes way more sense than what I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the reason we wanted to give you this kind of new one is that this reflects what we just shared.
Yeah.
But it's, you can see the difference between last one and this one, and then, there'll likely be another one. And so
Thank you.
wanted you to have that comprehensively.
Yeah, it is.
Good, Mr. Vogel.
Yeah, a couple things. I throw this out to the committee, not knowing, the technique of handling this. Would it be appropriate or inappropriate to have Citizen Potvin give his opinion on this? And I only say that because I personally hold Ron's perception of finance in very high esteem. I sat through several budget meetings with him last year. I found him to be very perceptive. And he has volunteered his time to help get the biggest bang we can for our buck. And I would like to know his take on this, good, bad, or otherwise. I don't know if that's appropriate or not. I throw that on the water, see if it floats.
I don't mind.
I think realistically, we could consider that to be public comment on this article, on this item in the agenda. So if there's anyone within the audience who would like to speak to this particular agenda item, seeing none, no.
Keep it brief, Ron.
I also want to note if there are any questions around the Article 2 stuff, Ms. Kraft is here. I didn't realize that when I was answering those questions, so she may want to add to something and if you do, please feel free.
So what you see here tonight that was presented is amazing work. Just amazing to the amount of work that has gone into this. And what you're seeing is the fruition of 3 years of work of trying to get this to a certain point. And I'm not talking just the special ed piece, but the whole budget. And it's going in the right direction. And I'm sure in the future budget, future discussions, you're going to have the opportunity to talk about several other items with some variables and flexibility that it's not done. What you see here today is not a done deal. There's still plenty to take a look at. I think one thing that stands out tonight and the point I tried to make in the finance committee is, and I've seen this in other municipalities that I've worked in, when you have something new proposed that comes with a revenue line, that it's important as you're asking for the support for increased spending on a particular line, that it's recognized that there's revenue that goes with this that's going to be offsetting that a good chunk of that cost, if not in this case, even more so. And this is the very thing that the community has asked for in regards to the audit and the changes in special ed. And I think your challenge in the committee is to tie that together and presenting it to the council and the community, that not only do you have these changes and there's this amazing dynamic, which I think is awesome, that's going to go in play, but you've got a $1.8 million revenue stream that needs to be identified somewhere. I don't know if Heather Hunter the city manager, can weigh in on this financially. I know other communities will add that revenue line when they put in a new operation because it's there. It's only stands to reason if you're going to have a program, you're going to be bringing these kids back, there's going to be some savings. If you're going to be reaching out and getting your Medicare, what we've left on the table, it's going to happen. There's some portion of it's going to happen. So that I think the challenge moving forward is, how do you quantify that where everybody's comfortable? Every stakeholder is comfortable, council, public, school committee. And the thing is, if you can articulate and move forward with that $1.8 million revenue line, well, I forget what the cost, what's the ask right now? Is it 5? You dropped it to 5.4. I think.
Go ahead. When you say drops to 5.4, what do you mean?
On the local share.
The amount of the increase is 3.5.
Oh, yeah. All right. So you're down to
Sorry,
3.5 now on a local share. So if you're articulating that 1.8 million in revenue, but now you're talking 1.7. The question is, how do you design the budget to be able to realize that? And then again, as far as you're asking about how things are going with the finance, there are other items that have some flexibility. And I really think that you guys from a public, now that I'm public citizen, I feel really good about this budget moving forward. And I think you guys are going to have a lot to work with, and that the work that's being done is just phenomenal. And I think what's so refreshing is that I don't think you ever saw this degree of work before. And at least in my experience in the 3 years here of what's being done. So, I think you have a wide range of opportunity here. And I think your job's going to be a little bit easier. And my only concern is the articulation to the council. That, and I think Linda really gets the whole picture in the finance committee. I'm glad she's a member of the finance committee because it's important, because they're going to be asking her these tough questions. And to have this sort of taken apart is going to, it's not a sell job. There's nothing that needs to be sold here. It's a school department operating responsibly and with responsible ideas. And we have tremendous opportunities to move forward. And the important thing I'm hoping is that they understand the revenue piece. And that's why I'm hoping somebody on the city side can weigh in and what would be appropriate to include on a revenue line and so forth. And so with that in mind, I think you guys are cruising really good, and we'll continue talking about the different issues in the finance committee and make your job a little easier. So far, so good. And I'm totally comfortable with what's going on and moving forward from a public perception, as John Q. Public, really pleased. And I'm also honored to have been kept onto the finance committee for transparency to the public. I'm not an elected official. I'm here just taking a look at the school's books, and it's really, really optimistic and positive. So, and I'm hoping that you guys can wrap it up in a positive way. That's it.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Ron. Or John, whichever way you'd prefer. Kristen, did you have anything you wanted to add as far as special ed or?
When you asked the question about hiring and for next year, I think the only thing we are going to have a little bit of trouble with is the hiring of the ed techs or BHPs, just because of the pay rate there. My hope is that bringing in the BCBAs and the teachers might attract more people that are going to come with them that are BHPs and ed techs. But that's my only hesitation. However, saying that, sometimes you have vacant ed tech positions, you can convert them to have an extra teacher, and we can serve kids that way. So I don't know. I just feel like I don't think we'll have a terrible time, but the only part we'll fall short on is the ed techs.
Any other questions for Kristen?
I think too, one other thing to point out, if we don't, no matter what, even if we don't get the main care specialist or whatnot, we still have close to 40 kids that need an outplacement. So they're gonna get placed once their spots open in other outplacements. So they're on a list right now. So I just want to point that out. So that'll be a cost. That's it.
It's from a budgetary perspective, at least from my chair, it's like an either or. We can either spend way more money and send our students away as soon as seats open up, or we can work to house them here where they should be, program for them as best we can, and save money. And so there's like these two very clear splits in the road. I also appreciate Member Potvin's sentiments, but I want to take 10 seconds to thank the team that's looking at this every day and night. Karen, Bill, Adam, Sue Williams over there, who also brings coffee. She also knows this budget inside out. We're, and other members of the team, Mike Carson and the management team, the details are important to us. The actuals are important to us. What has been actually spent versus just budgeting a number is very important to this process. So we're not done yet, but I think we've made a good stride tonight.
Mr. Vopalon.
Yeah, I'll try to be, this will be it for the night, hopefully, but I think our mantra should almost be, we have to spend money to save money, not make money, but to save money. And like other members, I am starting to receive communications from the public, Ward 7 citizens, people who voted for me, taxpayers, homeowners, and I am very proud to support the budget, the process here. I'm very proud to sit with other like-minded individuals who are concerned with the welfare of our students and the quality of our education. It's very nice to see that there are no, my perception, weak links in the chain, and that we're all in the same direction. So, we will get those phone calls and emails, and again, we may have to agree to disagree, as I like to say, with some of our constituents. Thank you.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know that the city council is meeting tomorrow night for their first budget workshop, and we will be getting our binders from the school department tomorrow night passed out to city council. And I will be giving my report for school committee work that we've done. I didn't give it last night because, well, it was a long night. So I asked if I could have the favor of the council to present tomorrow night instead. And so I'll be doing that. And I'm going to discuss some of this stuff. I think it's important that I bring up this conversation, have them start talking about it and talking about it now before Monday, so that they can have their questions ready on Monday and a real conversation can be had. So that's my hopes.
So it'd probably be really important for school board members to be at the workshop or listening to the workshop, just so we can hear what their questions might be, or
I would pay attention if I were you, definitely, yeah. And it'll be, it's on YouTube and all the time, so. And lately, get your popcorn, they're fun to watch.
It was a late night, Linda, we know. It's just. Anything else on this? No, the next item, no, Ms. Whitlow, no. What bill do you want?
And I know, go ahead, Tina, if you have something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, this is the 5th budget season that I've been through here. And this is the only time that I haven't felt overwhelmed and not known what was going on. You guys have done an amazing job, all of you. And Ron, we thank you for coming back and just reiterating, all that work that they've done. And this has been great.
I do want to just return to one of your slides, Jake, the one where you were putting all of the Article 2 changes. So I just want to clarify the second and third line just a little. So that third is that decision making, and I think Superintendent Langles pointed out, is that decision making thing of if we don't do things in Article 2, we're going to be facing an increase of 1.5 million. The 400,000 is shown in our revenue. Again, we're being kind of cautious with that figure, but that is on your revenue page. You will see that $400,000 represented on there. So I just want to make sure that you knew that second line is something that's realized.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, that being said, we'll move on to agenda item number 9 is to enter into an executive session to discuss negotiations in accordance with 1 MRSA 403D. I have a motion to go
So
into
moved.
executive. Whoop, I'm sorry, Ms. Parks.
At Monday's meeting, we didn't have our student representative, so we weren't able to get an update from student representative. I was wondering if since he's here, we could at least see if he has an update to give to us really quickly.
Certainly, yep, certainly. So we'll hold off on the motion for executive session. I guess, Omar, you're up.
For the most part, I don't really have a lot of updates. Like they were bringing up, I was building robots. It's been a busy few weeks. But Ms. Scott was saying last night during the Lewiston Youth Advisory Council meeting, we were talking about, we're planning on doing a big celebrate Lewiston and Lewiston history event around June, July-ish, which is going to be a big event involving all parts of Lewiston. We're planning on doing like a scavenger hunt type thing that lets people go around Lewiston and see all the different like pieces of history as well as the cultures and like these local businesses and just we're trying to plan a really big event like for like a blowout, right before we head out from the council.
Is that for students? Is that what you're trying to aim it towards, or just anybody?
The entire city, anyone can come. There will be raffles and prizes and like it's going to be a big event for the entire city to participate in. That's a goal.
Sounds exciting. I can't wait. Thanks.
Thank you and congratulations again. And I know other people said it when you were recognized earlier, but I guess I want to reiterate. You're not just a member of that team. Certainly you're a valued member of that team, but I watched the way others spoke about the work that you did. It's really next level stuff. We're really proud of you and thank you for representing our school in just such an amazing way.
Omar is a rock star.
Okay, so we'll go back to the executive session. Do we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Bowden, second by Ms. Whitlow. Any discussion? On favor? So moved. We'll go into executive